Good evening, folks. This is the last event of the year. And what an event it will be, because it's a fantastic pleasure to have Benoît Rittaud here. He's come from Paris directly to tell us all about what's going on in France. It's been quite an amazing year for climate policy, but France perhaps has experienced the most extraordinary protests for the first time that I can remember over a carbon tax, which is how the Yellow Vest movement actually started. So we are extremely happy to have Benoît here. Benoît is a mathematician. He is a lecturer at the university in Paris, and he's also the director of the French climate-realist. So they have a small organization of climate skeptics and realists, and he will tell us about this as well. But our main focus tonight will be to try and understand what is going on in France and how, out of the blue, a huge mass movement erupted because of a carbon tax on petrol and diesel. Benoît, over to you. You try and explain it. And we know the French like a riot. I mean, that's part of the DNA of being a Frenchman, right? But this seems to be somewhat different. Tell us how different. Thanks for coming, by the way.
Thank you so much, Benny. So I'm also very happy to be here. Sorry for my English, and from now I want to tell you that if you don't understand what I'm saying, just say so, and I'll try to rephrase it. And also, when we will have a discussion, please, when you have any question, please think that I'm stupid, and so use simple words that I can understand. So, and maybe you're not far away from the truth. So the question was, what's going on in France? And the real answer is that we don't really know.
No.
We don't know because, first, it's a complex question. It's not over yet. And, well, yesterday it was big. Now it's very weak. No one can tell what it will be tomorrow. It's difficult to know. And this crisis goes deeply into the spirit and history of the country. And we have a lot of people that try to find historical examples that compare to the Yellow Vests. And some of them goes back to ancient times, where there were Jacqueries, who was revolts of peasants against taxes or things like that. And we have really an interesting debate in this respect about history of what France is. And indeed, we have an old tradition of riots. And but even if we have this kind of tradition, no one anticipated the events. No one, apart, of course, professional declinologists or alarmists or systematic alarmists, of course, because well, there's a saying of Voltaire. Probably he never said exactly that, but there is a saying that astrologers don't have the privilege of being always wrong. And so it's not difficult to be right when predicting any social movement in France. So, but do not be abused by that. In fact, no one anticipated it. So the Yellow Vests make me feel quite. Well, I had some hope initially. It was good. In a quite typical French chauvinism, I'd say that I was quite proud of my country in the beginning, and then also in a typical French declinism, I have to say that I'm not that proud today. Before the Yellow Vests, there was in France some sheep-like way of mind about all climate policies, and well, everything that is said to be good for the planet is certainly good for the people. And so there is no, in France, there is no culture of climate realism. Well, we have nothing like this place here, like the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Our association exists only since the March 16. It's very recent. And so nothing to compare, nothing compares to what we can see in other countries. So seeing these people raising up against a carbon tax, indeed, you said that was really a beautiful moment. At last, we did something, and we did it like we do in France. That we riots, movements, social movements. It's the way it goes in France, very very commonly. So sure, it was at cost from the beginning, because it has first a human cost. There were 8 people killed because of yellow vests, and we should never forget that. And a lot of people were injured, and it's still the case at each new movement, new day of protest, of demonstration. So we shouldn't forget that first. Then it has a quite huge economic cost. Shop closed or looted at a season which is important to achieve their turnover, and it's also a problem. And then there is also a public image cost, because videos of insurrection on the Avenue des Champs-Élysées is not the best way to attract tourists. So this is a kind of cost. And today I read, 2 minutes before the beginning of the talk, that the French statistical organism, the INSEE, said that the cost of the yellow vests is about 0.1% of global GDP in France. So it's not a disaster, of course. 0.1 is not a disaster. National GDP, yes. But still, it is a cost. It is something. So we can, of course, argue that apart from violence and death, of course, 0.1% of GDP is the price to be paid, okay? Because we're not supposed to fall in love with a growth rate, and there are some things that can be considered as more important than just economy. And even if I'm French, I will try not to be arrogant, but possibly the debate about Brexit has this kind of argument too. Again, I don't want to advise you or tell any opinion about Brexit here, even if I'm French, I say. But possibly there's this kind of argument, okay, it will be at cost, because sure, the economy will have problems with the Brexit. But still, we recover other things that can be just summarized by a growth rate or a GDP. But even if you accept this price, unfortunately, there are quite a lot of opposing forces already finding their ways to oppose this this momentum against carbon taxes. So we must be very careful not to be too optimistic. So a few words about the uprising itself. So before the uprising, the president, Emmanuel Macron, was already in trouble. It did not came from nothing. Because in July, there were a big scandal involving a bodyguard, whatever, it's not important. The details are not important. But it was it hit very hard the power. It hit very hard Emmanuel Macron. And in general, this kind of scandal, of course, probably you have this kind of scandals too here, and we have never, of course, sorry.
Everything is fine here.
But we have this kind of thing on a regular basis, of course, as every country in the world. Of course, it's difficult, but in general, okay, it's you can get rid of it in some way. But this very scandal was very difficult for Emmanuel Macron. This is the occasion in which we discovered that, in fact, his election was really a kind of blitzkrieg. That means an extraordinary success in the 2017 election, presidential election, but without fundamentals. I mean, and his majority in the parliaments is very weak. Indeed, there are a lot of people with him, but of inexperienced MPs. And when this scandal came out, they just didn't know what to do. And then from this time, I think that we know that the power of Emmanuel Macron is not that big, is not that strong. For a year, he was considered as very powerful. In France, we were talking about the new world, the nouveau monde. There was really a lot of hope of reform, to reform the country, etc. Macron even succeeded in reform the national railway company, which is very known in France for being very difficult to reform. But he succeeded. For the first time. So he was quite powerful, but it was in the beginning. And as it happens with Blitzkrieg, in the beginning, okay, you get all the successes you want, but then when you don't have enough fundamentals, that it crumbled down. And after that, there were two interesting resignations in the government. Two interesting when seen as how can I put it? Sorry. It's interesting to see it now, what it was. Two resignations of two major members of the government. The first one was Nicolas Hulot. Nicolas Hulot is an ancient TV presenter who made quite interesting shows on nature, and he became very ecologist, save the planet, etc. And he's quite accepted, well seen in France because of this. He's the nice guy, really the nice guy. And then he said, "Well, I can't stay in the government because not enough is done for ecology, so I resign." And then the second one, a few weeks later, was Gérard Collomb, which was the Home Secretary, I think, Ministre de l'Intérieur. Yes, I think it's Home Secretary. So it's also a very powerful minister. And he left just a few weeks before Gilets jaunes rose. And when he resigned, he said, "Well, we have a problem in France. We have a divided country. So there is the next Home Secretary will have some kind of problems, maybe." And now, of course, since he said that, he is now the old wise guy who has planned everything. Again, not sure that is right, because it's telling. Both these resignations are telling because, it was both ecology and social problems that arose next with Gilets jaunes. But even if it's telling, it is also misguided because Collomb was understood as the sayings of Collomb was understood as we will have suburbs riots as we had in 2005. Maybe you remind that there were burning cars in the suburbs. Quite the place I am teaching. It's kind of the north of Paris. Yeah. And in fact, we had a rural uprising. It's not at all the suburbs of big towns. It's really rural uprising. Also, the resignation of Hulot is also misguided because he told us, we need an ecological revolution, and this is the most important. And in fact, what happened is an opposition to carbon taxes. So, carbon tax in France had quite bad luck. The first time carbon tax were set up, it was in 2010. The Constitutional Council censored the bill because it was considered as breaking the equality between citizens before tax. Is it clear? Well,
so it was regressive.
No, it was unequal between citizens. Yeah. That's what I mean. And then 3 years ago, François Hollande, the previous president, set up the Loi de transition énergétique, the energy transition, and it was intended to raise progressively. And the ton of CO2 was first in 2014 to set up to €7. Then in next year, in 2019, it was it was intended to put it at €55. That's a huge increase. But in fact, we know also that to be able to achieve its goals, it should have been set up at €100 in 2024. So what happened was a revolt from the rural world, and one of the first answers made by Emmanuel Macron was to set up a high council for the climate. We're really specialists of this in France. Don't know if it's the same here, but there is an old French saying that when you have a problem, create a commission. Yeah, so now we have the same. You have the same here.
You copied the climate change committee.
That's possible, yes, probably. So now we have a high council because we already have a lot of things, but one more. And an interesting saying of the Yellow Vests is the following: the elite is worried about the end of the world. We're worried about the end of the month. And, it was very interesting motto, and really was telling. And it's for the first time an intellectual opposition to what we know here. That means the idea of saving the planet instead of saving lives, instead of helping people to have better wages or things like that. And so this was, I think it was the second great moment of the Yellow Vests, is this very sentence, which was given in the beginning. But are the Yellow Vests climate realists, even if they don't know that they are? To answer that, I think we have to remind what Julius Caesar said: men believe what they want to believe. And we should try to avoid believing just what we want to believe. That would be great if Yellow Vests were the first climate realists, social justice and climate justice, the real climate justice with the Yellow Vests. That's just not true. That's a naive way of seeing things. But in reality, now under the pressure, the government accepted to stop the tax. So first it was just wait, just discuss. Then okay, we remove it. It's you won't have a carbon tax anymore. So that's great. But since it happened very late and the movement was growing and growing, even the cancellation of the carbon tax was not enough. And now we have very different revendications from Yellow Vests. The return of the wealth tax, don't ask me why. The rejection of the Pact of Marrakesh on migrations, nothing to do with the initial revendication. And now the real thing that is discussed everywhere and that everybody agreed to have a look is the possibility that could be offered to citizens to force a referendum on any subject. If enough people want a referendum on any subject, that they could have the right to impose it to the nation. So this has nothing to do with initial askings, and so we have to understand that Yellow Vest is not a political movement. People in there are not don't have a political culture. They just have problems and they wanted to be heard, but nothing else. And it's not a revolution as we had 2 centuries ago. It's more Jacquerie, as I said before. We're not happy, we want everything, but in fact they don't every time know what really they want. They just suffer, but there's no real project for another society that could be better for them. And to illustrate the point, I would like to mention, to quote a text published, an article published by Florence Aubenas, which is a great journalist in France, very respected. And she published his, well, she went to see Gilets Jaunes, and she asked them, and she just take notes, and she wrote it in Le Monde, which is the journal, the reference newspaper in France. I can tell you that it's difficult for me to tell you good things about Le Monde because they were really awful to me. But still, we have to make the difference between things. And even in Le Monde, there can be interesting people, of course, and Florence Aubenas is one of them. And she writes this: around 2 other traffic circles. So, yes, as you may know, traffic circles are the place to be for Gilets Jaunes. It's not Avenue des Champs-Élysées. They went there because they are from rural countries. So, okay, when we go to Paris, we go to Champs-Élysées. But in general, the place to be is traffic circles. So, around 2 other traffic circles are also busy, each with its identity and its hut. That of Leclerc is a local hypermarket. That of Leclerc is the biggest, the local showcase of the movement, the VIP roundabout called the HQ. Here are the news, true or false. Brussels does not want farmers anymore in France. Did you know? The banks will go bankrupt. The money will be blocked. Remove everything you have. Did someone saw the adjutant of the gendarmerie, the one which is handsome? The only subject that nobody talks about is the moratorium on the fuel tax just announced by the government. The increase in its amount triggered the movement, but it does not interest anymore. Too late. Never mind. Everybody is already elsewhere. Some of them are not even aware of the news. We'll see that. So what to do? So now that the carbon tax is gone, the president announced a public debate about 4 important subjects in France. And the first of them is the energy transition. So something could be still done, even if yellow vests are not especially interested in energy transition. So 10 days ago, it was before this announcement, we launched, my association launched a petition to stop energy transition. And we'll soon cross 5,000 signatures. It's not a lot, but we're a small group and we don't have a lot of medias with us. So still, it's interesting. So we have to understand that the yellow vests are not a climate realist movement, but still it is a kind of bargain. We have an opportunity here. And maybe to see the opportunity, I can quote Florence Aubenas once more. She herself quoting Dorothée, which is 42 and lives with 1,100 euros per month in Marmande, which is a small town of 17,000 inhabitants in the southwest of France. And Dorothée said, I'd been boiling in front of my TV for years, saying, nobody thinks like me or what? When I heard about the yellow vests, I said to my husband, this is for me. So hopefully this time it will be for us too, climate realists. Thank you for your attention.